never know with technology these days, huh? Yes, let me just make sure. 1 second. And we can also wait for a few folks to come in. Okay, yeah, it seems like we're live. All right, so I'm monitoring here our page. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining this AMA session. My name is Victor. I work on the community side here at Saywise, and today we have Destiny Brandt. We decided to start this new series, this new AMA series, to help people like sort of navigate the current job market, um, ask questions to people who are, I guess, on the other side of the table, who are recruiting, people who are experts in this field right now. A lot is changing due to AI. And so, that is one thing that we do a lot here at Saywise. We believe in like content creation as a way to get your name out there. And Destiny's, I feel like she's a pro at this. And you can even see the background there. So yeah, Destiny, thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us. Very, very nice to be here.
Hey, hey. Nice to meet you too, Victor.
And guys, as we start, we do have someone, Thomas, in our community side as well. He will be managing the content or the comments. My bad. So feel free to ask questions that you might have directly to Destiny here. I am keeping an eye on the comments as well. Yeah, please feel free to just like drop any questions that you have, anything that you like to ask Destiny directly. And and yeah, so why don't we get started? Destiny, before we begin, I know, maybe a quick introduction to the audience would be great. Maybe like just painting the picture of who you are and the work that you do.
Sure. I am an external recruiter, but more specifically, I'm a headhunter. That's something that a lot of people, millennials, people who are a lot younger, are not exposed to. The difference between an external recruiter and a headhunter is my loyalties lie with my candidates. If I genuinely get to know who you are, how you operate, where you've been, where you're trying to go, and give you resources to put your best foot forward, chances are you will come to me exclusively to give you insights into the jobs that I happen to be representing. So I place my average candidate at this point 3 or 4 times. So we're constantly making moves together. Sales recruiting is almost all I do. Go to market recruiting. A lot of people that I work with like to bring multiple solutions to a problem, work with a high amount of autonomy, and to be able to be a part of something bigger than themselves. I also work on some executive marketing and product positions, but sales, talking to my peers is really my bread and butter. And I spend 60 to 70 hours a week just talking to salespeople about what their goals are 30, 60, 90 years in the future.
Oh damn. Okay. I feel like sales. When I was in college, maybe this was I guess almost 10 years ago now. Sales was super big, and obviously, like we're seeing a lot of different AI companies trying to disrupt the space, right? When I go to San Francisco, I see a lot of different ads for automating sales with AI. Well, I feel like sales has been a big part of your story, and you found sales as a way to sort of like cement yourself professionally. For someone in the audience right now who doesn't come from like a typical sales or business development or business background, what do you think is the current like outlook on the sales role? What do you think it's like an honest path into a first sales role in this day and age?
Yeah. I was always obsessed with the idea of being in sales, like whether I was working at Subway as an assistant manager and always trying to get like higher revenue goals. I just had this natural desire to always get better, and obviously being very money motivated, whether that was a $10 bonus or, a gift card for, 10% off from one of my bosses. So I think that people are naturally called to sales. You have some sort of exposure, whether that's, sports ball or someone told you that you would be good at it at a certain point. I kind of fell into sales by naturally just selling to people. I was able to get interviews with companies like DocuSign and ZipWhip by essentially just selling massage packages to people who are like, "Hey, I'm a sales manager. I'm a top performing account executive. What would it take for you to interview?" So one of my biggest like tips is for putting your best foot forward and getting people to come to you versus them is, have a job that there is exposure in the right type of location. I happen to be in downtown Seattle and selling a very bougie type of service. So naturally, those people were already coming into me and they can kind of like see me rather than me tell them, or just go and, Google like, top startups in San Francisco and then go to those LinkedIn pages, go to the page, type in account executive, founder, and just start, building your center of influence with people who are already in that space. And then you can start setting up your LinkedIn or maybe even writing content around some of these wins, even if it's just B2C or even something that doesn't seem 100% transferable to, like a B2B sales cycle. So I do think exposure is really important. And especially on LinkedIn, everything's done online. You can really curate the people who can be your direct audience. And then all you have to do is start making asks at that point and then running the interview cycle very similar to how you would a sales cycle, which is, getting noticed essentially through DMs and email campaigns and cold calling. Try to aim for, at least 40, 50, 75 a day if you're really trying to show them rather than tell them. So having the type of, personality traits that are either something that you're born with or you're exposed to that you then nurture, and then making sure that you have as much direct access to that audience as possible can really make a difference, because going into an interview blind, applying to black hole at hr.com can, be a part of the process for sure. But obviously knowing people will shorten that sales cycle length and increase that, deal size over time. So for anyone who, is thinking about a career in SDRs or getting a sales internship, start doing that Googling and adding those personas essentially on LinkedIn now, and then start thinking, what are the kind of things that you can share on your LinkedIn profile that will really tell the story, so that that trust is already built before you even meet him or them.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, I guess you're saying, just to recap here. So, just get the foot on the door somehow, get the experience rolling, and then somehow document that also, to like whatever means you can, right? Using, I guess in your case, you're using LinkedIn a lot.
Yeah, I've used LinkedIn, or even the way that you set something up on your LinkedIn. A lot of people just add the job. If you go and you dig back into my receipts, essentially how my LinkedIn is set up is how someone of all backgrounds should be setting up their LinkedIn, where I'm talking about like times I turned a yes into a no, or you'll see on a lot of my other, socials, like regardless of what your job is, you have some sort of activity, right? We're all doing X amount of emails, X amount of meetings internally and externally. So by breaking down, essentially write down every boring thing you do in your job and tie that to some sort of like activity or metric, it'll already look like sales, because you're talking about every function of your job and how much were you doing, because scale is important. And then using words like, designed a, a marketing initiative to get more massage gift cards closed, or developed Google reviews to get more awareness. So as I was more exposed to sales, I was able to take kind of the boring mechanics of even a front desk job and break them up into two categories. One is math, essentially all the metrics, and then the other is tone, the type of energy designed, built, pioneered. And even those boring jobs, whether you're selling Subway sandwiches or massage packages out of front desk, can be broken down into essentially metrics and tone. So by adding the right people into your LinkedIn, right? Again, typing in tech startups and adding all the people who work there, and then having bullet points under every job of the amount of things that you did and some of the impact with kind of those like high vibe types of words will get people to naturally come to you. I think a big misunderstanding is that companies want to run an ad. Running an ad is absolutely miserable. No company, regardless if you're a first time founder or a $1 billion, year org like startup, wants to run an ad. They prefer candidates to come to them, and you can manufacture that by getting yourself in the room, by showing up on people's reports, by using certain key terms and adding these personas, and then qualifying yourself by having some of these numbers there. So really LinkedIn is the secret sauce for getting visibility and qualifying yourself, and adding the content and some of those extra things end up being a nice to have necessarily. As long as your receipts in those bullet points are on lock, people are going to naturally come to you as a way to bypass having to go through, the crusty rusty ETS constantly.
Wow, so much to break down here. Before we jump into the, I guess, the LinkedIn part in depth, I wanted to, maybe, I don't come from a sales background, although I am in the GTM team here at Saywise. We just started using like an email outreach platform. That's been a quite interesting process for us here. just learning about it. And I feel like the modern sales world, when I think about sales, I think about, the guy in the insurance with the insurance, bag, just going door to door and knocking, trying to sell. And obviously that doesn't happen anymore. And I think even like sending multiple emails or calling, I think you even mentioned like, oh, you just need to cold call. It's a numbers game, right? Do you feel like those are that reality is shifting now with like a lot of different automated tools? And then as a follow up to that, how do you see the current SDR role, right? Like how do you see it operating on a day to day basis for like a modern company? And how should someone like develop those skills right now to sort of like match that also for the future?
Sure. I think the first thing is a lot of us have biases, right? Biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious, a big motivator in how we think and how we operate. I think a lot of us, especially people who stumbled into sales, have the same bias around like, oh, well, salespeople, they're very coin operated, they're very transactional, they aren't to be trusted. I think one of the bigger surprises I've had interviewing people at scale is how the best salespeople are incredibly nerdy, incredibly intentional. They're half the time they're really neurodivergent. They love breaking down problems and analyzing things. So, and that ends up becoming an issue even with some of my recruiting, right? Is like they'll get in and they'll like, oh, your candidate was, maybe a less experienced to sales type of founder. Is like your candidate, wasn't as, direct, or, they had more questions, and it doesn't give off the type of presence you expect someone with this like inflated type of ego and almost like a personality like mine, like very big, very good storyteller, right? So the best salespeople truly are probably more introverted, a little bit more analytical, and a little bit more neurodivergent. And so that can be like hard to kind of like mask and play at that bias when you're in an interview, for example. So the best salespeople, people who take home 2, 3, 4, 5 millions of dollars a year, are probably more introverted and a little bit more reserved. And but that can cause issues, with the recruiting cycle when a founder expects one thing and then the person who can actually like, do the job ends up looking or sounding another way, which is why conscious and unconscious biases on every level is super important. The second thing is you're kind of talking about automation. This is something that I try not to say like live. I personally don't use any automation. I do not send out emails at scale. I'm not against automation. Some of my best candidates and clients are automation tools. I think there's below the iceberg, which is there's kind of two fundamentals of being really, really good at sales. The one is understanding your buyer, which is why you'll see on my website, like whether this is your first job or your 10th job, being really intentional about the buyer. Find the buyer for you. For me in particular, I love talking to salespeople. These are peers, so I can teach them something, they can teach me something through every single conversation. If I'm doing a good discovery, asking the right types of questions, I'm learning something. So just by literally doing my job, I'm becoming a better salesperson. Same with founders. A lot of founders are, this is their first business or their 10th business. So I can learn more about how they operate, what they think, and the best products aren't usually ran by, people who have a sales background. So being intentional about who that buyer is. So let's say you are, really wanting to get a job at one of these, Bay Area startups, or you really want to work at, Salesforce, understanding who am I selling into, right? So, like a Salesforce, you're selling to sales and marketing leaders, which is going to be really congruent with what I do. Going and whether you use like a prompt or you just, like talking to ChatGPT or whatever you're doing, like what is the buyer matrix? Who are the dudes or who are the people that you're going to be selling into? And what are their success measurements, right? What keeps them up at night? What are the stuff that they're reporting to their boss about? All anyone ever cares, and Katie Dorsey says this about in sales, is not getting fired. So if you can understand what this specific role is doing, how their success is measured, and what is their risk involved with not keeping their job, especially with the VP of sales having an average runway of 18 months, the more you can personalize. Personalization is not based on, hey, I know your business and you just raised, another stage of funding, which takes a lot of research and scale, and it doesn't really scale. You can send thousands of 10 or thousands of those messages and they don't go. It's personalization based on that persona. So if every time you get an interview or you start looking at some of these companies, think, who would I be selling to? And if you start getting excited about the people you're selling into, let's say you're more neurodivergent and you've taught yourself code, maybe you're better off selling into more of a technical persona. Me, I barely know what technology is. So selling, to a CTO or CTO, they don't feel like a peer. It's not the type of personalization or research I like to do. So I'm all about automation. I'm all about, putting like having enough exposure because, like I said, with the dials, it is a metrics game. But when you're essentially deploying these messages, because the best SDRs are really good copywriters, and what makes a really good copywriter, it's being able to take this very convoluted message and keep it in 150 words or less, have a very specific type of tone, and make it feel very personal in a way that's not personal, by being able to say, hey, typically when we talk to VPs of sales, these are some of the common challenges, by really breaking down some of these buyer matrix things that you can do in your preliminary research, even in an interview, and definitely within your first few months of that role. So the messages, you can send thousands of messages out there, but if it's not hitting that person who is essentially going to meet with you as either a champion or decision maker, because they don't feel like you know your job, that's going to be an issue. So I see a lot of people like outsource to like these SDR companies or these consulting companies, and I'm like, has the people who are writing your copy or like setting up your Apollo, like, have they ever sold into that buyer? Like, how, what to them, one of the things that you can ask that vendor is, how are they personalizing at scale? So messaging is really important, and that's why I like founding roles, because the right types of candidates are curious about that buyer, and they like writing copy or dripping this information in a way that's talking about the problems that persona would have, versus like, this is a feature, and Y Combinator just gave us 100 million, so you should too, type of thing. So messages at scale are great. You just want to make sure that that message is personalized based on that persona, and that it hits on some of the core aspects of what good copy is, which is everything should look like a text message. And it can be very hard, whether you're selling a nuanced service like a recruiting, a staffing service like I do, or an AWS cloud spend tool, of taking this high level information and breaking it down to literally two sentences, so that it looks not like they're being sold to, but instead they're being advised. So copywriting, curiosity around who the person you're selling to. And these are just good exercises for people to do in an interview, right? Like thinking about the things that they would need to say in a written outbound message, and the questions that they would need to ask that persona in order to even warrant a conversation in the sales cycle. And by typing those things up and sending that as an agenda or post interview follow up within your SDR process, will already elevate the process so much, because they'll go, okay, well, we have some sort of resources, we have onboarding, but you've really like taken the time to understand that buyer and how you can take this more convoluted information and break it down to a few sentences here or there. So there's tons of AI companies. What is AI versus machine learning? What kind of position do they have in the market? What makes the company different is very important when you especially start getting a lot of buy-in for interviews or deciding who to stay committed to. But breaking it back down to why anyone should be really taking a sales job or a specific role, which is, what about that buyer? What about that persona? What is their job like? And if you can go in with that amount of curiosity and empathy, and then be able to break it down to one sentence or less, you can pretty much do the functions of the role now, because now it's just kind of increasing that activity and paying attention to the data, your open rates, what the positive conversations are coming out of that, and being able to tweak the mechanics after that. So automation is great, but what is being automated, what's being sent out there, and like who wrote that. If you have a boss that's like, oh, we bought this from a consulting company, or we wrote this 20 years ago because he's a template zaddy, I would think more critically on, okay, is this the type of environment I want, where they have this established messaging and I may not know if it works or not until 3 to 6 months? Or is it a really earlier stage startup, being a founding SDR directly with the founder, where he's like, hey, I know a lot about these buyers and the problems we solve, but I am going to trust you and give you a lot of autonomy to be able to learn and break these things down and teach me, essentially. So it's just the difference of use our messaging and hope it works, or develop your own messaging and continue to design, test, and perfect until it can be proven to work or not work.
No, I absolutely love that advice. We so I'd say wise. We've been using this tool, and it's been an uphill learning curve for all of us. I think just getting the message right. I love this advice that you gave about figuring out the profile matrices there. I feel like that applies to like startups, right? In general, like as they build, like, we try to figure out who's the ideal customer profile, and what are they looking for? How can we solve their problems? And so, yeah, I love it, because I feel like even me, I'm always getting like sales emails, and I'm like, oh my god, like this again, right? And then it's very hard to find one that actually hits exactly where you have a problem with, right? And then I think it shows that they did the research and whatnot. And Destiny, so you are in a role that I think, as you mentioned, like you've been building receipts, right? And you're in a role that it's very obviously like you're headhunter staffing, and so I feel like it's a lot of trust based as well, both you with your clients, but also with the candidates you serve. Can you maybe exemplify how do you start building those receipts for yourself using LinkedIn and whatnot? And then how do you think someone with like limited exposure right now can start quickly building that trust with the audience they're trying to serve?
Yeah, I think the example I gave around like selling, working at Subway or, working at a front desk, everything can be broken down into the mechanics of metrics, right? So, step one is setting up your LinkedIn, list every job. I don't care if you're there for 5 minutes or 5 years. And if there's any sort of sales aspect to that, it doesn't hurt to kind of put in parentheses sales. So assistant manager, Subway sales. That way they have that vibe, like that trust is built just based on title alone, and then you list every single thing that you did daily, weekly, monthly, and you tie a number to it, if you can. Obviously, as an assistant manager, I had a lot more exposure to the total amount of revenue I was doing, per shift or the entire company, but you don't need to think that deep. It's like, I worked with 10 customers a day, a $2, $10 deal size equaling, $200, per day, $1,000 per week or whatever. So essentially bullet points, you make a list of every boring thing that you did, you tied some sort of number to it and put that in bullet points. Already having the sales in parentheses and the numbers are already going to show them, okay, this person knows the mechanics of like what it takes to actually build pipeline. So that's easy enough. That's something that every person can essentially, do today to put their best foot forward. um, the second thing that you can do is you can steal them from my website. You can think about all the boring ass interviews you've ever had where like they're always playing Amazonian. Tell me about a time, Victor, that you had to bring multiple solutions to a problem. Tell me about a time that you had to turn a yes into a no, or a no into a yes. Tell me about a time that you had to be scrappy. And you just pick like, the three questions and you break that down. The situation was I was an assistant manager at Subway. The task was I needed to generate as much revenue as possible. The action I took was working the opening shift while having to prepare and talk to customers. The result was I was closing about $1,000, a week in revenue. The result was, or the takeaway was, these experiences have prepared me for an SDR role. Now you just have a Google Doc. You can load that on media onto your page. So now every time someone finds your profile, whether they find it on their own search or you're interviewing with them and they're making those judgments about you either before or after, you have these specific kind of breakdown stories. So everyone can come up with those. All of us have done things within a role that can hit on some of the core themes of sales, which is influencing, persuading, and having kind of a mechanic on how you just did your job to, be able to go home at the end of the day. So adding numbers and metrics essentially in bullet points under your LinkedIn profile, adding sales in parentheses, regardless of the title that they gave you, if there's any sort of sales aspect to it, and then building out a piece of media of times that you were scrappy, turned a no into a yes, or had to bring multiple solutions to a problem as kind of key themes, will help you get that visibility, or it shorten your sales cycle length, because now everyone is kind of building those trusts that you understand enough of that, and now they can start positioning their role and the differences and either sell you or sell you out of how the same or different it could be. So very simple little things that you can essentially add to your LinkedIn.
Wonderful, Destiny. Yeah, I think I feel like I'm getting a master class here. So thank you so much for sharing all that. I wanted to go into the comments here. I see some folks sent in some questions. Maybe this one first. I guess you talked a lot about LinkedIn. Um, would you say that's the best kind of sales portfolio a candidate can have at
It's
today's
similar to
age?
sales, right? People spend all this time on their resume, and I have templates and frameworks and all that sort of boring stuff on how to set up your receipt. But LinkedIn is really the Bible, similar to sales. No one's giving us 30 minutes of our time to talk about what we've done and how we want. And most executives or founders are forced to fish for themselves and they don't want to run that ad. So some people don't want to put numbers on their LinkedIn, but they'll put it on their resume, especially people a lot older in their career. That's, business suicide as far as I'm concerned. So LinkedIn is really the Bible. There's so many jobs out there. Most of my earlier stage companies, I say to my founders, take that ad down. We don't need everyone and their mom, applying to this job. I'm going to talk to 20 people. I'm going to curate my top three, right? And those are the people that we should move forward based on the understanding that I have of them over, X period of time. So you have to have your LinkedIn set up. You have to have those numbers, any sort of media you can add, whether it's those behavioral stories that we talked about, or let's say your boss, if you look at some of my media, it's some of the weirdest stuff. It's like a sticky note my boss would give me. You're one of the best salespeople I've ever worked with. Great. And no one giving me President's Club or a trip to Cancun. So a lot of us have screenshots and receipts of things. Add that as a way to kind of build that social proof, because a lot of the jobs that are out there are on LinkedIn. And I always say to people, anytime someone's trying to do this, like these buzzwords buzzwords or these fear tactics of ATS friendly resumes, or the untapped job market, the increase your inbound lead post on my website on some of the things that you need to have to get into the room and qualify yourself are everything. And you lose not having your LinkedIn set up once when some low level recruiter who makes $200,000 to $300,000 a year minimum as a niche sales recruiter is comparing you against everyone else on her profile. And then when that executive opens up your profile right before that final interview and is like, okay, Victor, why are we here today? If you don't have some sort of tone or numbers that are in alignment with what the sales job is like, you're going to have to build this case while he's running the call and you only have 30 minutes. So making sure that your LinkedIn is set up with at least some of the small things that we talked about today will really increase the amount of reports that you're on and the amount of people that actually reach out to you because you've qualified. I say this for founders all the time. You could be the only product in the marketplace that does what they do. Your main investor could be the CFO of Penske that's keeping your lights on. If that is not really obvious on your own LinkedIn profile, because people like to buy from people, not companies, the amount of clicks that it takes for them to click into your profile, click onto your website, that's a lot of work for someone who literally owes you nothing, especially in potentially a very proactive type of sell, like a cybersecurity solution where no one wakes up one day and does that. So that type of visibility on your page before people look into anything else, your resume, your stuff that you added into the ATS. So LinkedIn is one of the most important things to at least make sure that you have the numbers, the tone of the vibe of the things that you've done, and then some sort of social proof, whether that's just a screenshot or some of those sales stories, will really help you put your best foot forward with the amount of opportunities that come to you and the opportunities that actually convert. And then to making sure that that solves kind of the inbound issue, hopefully doing outbound. I always say to people the most important thing that you can do, and if you only take one piece of advice from me today, it'll be to max out your connections every week, no matter what. The only reason I get to work for myself and everyone else has to work for some dude here is every week, no matter what, I max out my connections. So you essentially pick a title, founder, or like vice president of sales or SDR manager, the dude who's responsible for hiring you, and then a product based keyword if you can. So let's say you want to sell an AI tool, founder an AI tool, filter it by United States, filter it by computer software. If you're doing outbound constantly and building that center of influence, people are going to come to you through the inbound channel and people are going to come to you through the outbound channel, and you get about 250 requests a week. And the more intentional you can be with the right type of persona and some of the keywords of the industries you maybe want to serve within SaaS or within services will help just make sure that intentionality and those conversions happen a lot faster. So set up your LinkedIn for people to come to you and then max out your connections every week. Use those 250. They restart every 7 days to make sure that you're constantly getting that sort of exposure. Because again, companies do not want to run an ad and talk to a bunch of strangers. They prefer to essentially work with the people who are in their established network. And if you're not showing them, rather than telling them by finding them and saying, hey, if I found you, I can find, a very similar type of buyer, you're really essentially leaving money on the table. And a lot of people will take a job too, and then they'll stop doing that. They'll stop building their receipts on their LinkedIn. They'll start adding. And those are the kind of people who are constantly reactive. The best way to constantly have that exposure is to be proactive. So no matter how tired, busy, overwhelmed you are selling some dude's software, essentially, the more important it is to take those 10 minutes every single day at the end to just add a new sales story, try to add another metric, add another receipt, and max out those connections every week, even if that just means you're outside watching your dog play at the dog park and you spend 5 minutes doing that, so that you essentially can go to your first connections versus applying. And from the moment you apply, you're already at the mercy of their process and what they need from you versus you creating jobs through adding the right types of buyers or personas first.
No, this is all wonderful to hear. I feel like I mean, especially with like ChatGPT, Claude, nowadays you can just like craft the very perfect resume and like one in a sea of millions, right? And then on LinkedIn, if you're building your brand right, telling your stories, I think what you the advice you just gave, it not only applies to sales jobs, but really I feel like any jobs in today's world, right? I feel like it's having that storytelling component, being able to articulate who you are and then who you're targeting, right? I think
And even that's
is
intimidating, right? Because we kind of talked about the profile being more analytical, a little bit more reserved, maybe a little neurodivergent. Like, even when I hear people say brand, I'm like, I spend no time on my brand, literally at all. Like, my whole LinkedIn content is shit posting. Like, about to get on a podcast teaching students about how to put their best foot forward in their career. So you that kind of thing comes naturally once you start getting the validation of people adding you because you're on their reports, and then you just post once you have like an emotional feeling about things. I was excited to talk to students because I haven't talked to students in the last 6 years. So don't see that as another like, oh god, I have to be like posting every day, and I need to constantly be building my receipts. It's like, no, if you're on the right type of report and you're intentionally adding the right type of buyers, you don't need a brand. The brand comes naturally when you're validated or you're feeling frustrated. Why am I applying to all these jobs and it's not giving? Well, turn that loss into a win by being like, well, what was that half-assed question they happen to have asked me in an attempt to interview? Oh, they asked me how I turned a no into a yes, or how I'm gonna build pipeline. Well, if this dude's gonna ask me, probably the next 10 dudes looking at my profile is gonna ask me too. Let me make a little shit post where I don't overthink it. Literally 2 minutes is the boundary. Flag that if it really is a love letter to the dude who I actually want to hire me, or a boundary of the time that I don't want to waste. And then bam, now you have a brand. So like, don't see that as an extra step into just like putting the numbers on the profile and adding a few pieces of media and then maxing out those connections. See that as a nice to have that naturally comes when you have an emotional response on what's working and not working.
I absolutely love that. I think it's really, I think a lot of people get, I myself, I'll put myself on top of that list. I get very much intimidated about the content I'm putting out,
Yeah.
and it's just like a daunting task. And so yeah, I feel like you've hit upon several points, and like I think part of what we do here at Say Wise is to really try to streamline that process. So you mentioned, oh, when you go out, you walk your dog in the park, like I feel like that's what we're trying to build with Say Wise, like really help folks create content, like as if I'm talking to you, right? I think you gave a bunch of incredible advice, and then just being able to, for instance, getting this and then transforming into story, maybe into a post. As you said, you can do it yourself, obviously, but I think this is something that we're trying to really like make it easy and streamlined through Say Wise as well. So I feel like that's pretty incredible to hear all that you said. And can you maybe so you mentioned that your creation process right now is like not overthink it and you just want to post it. Is there is there
You don't
another
need a
like
bunch of content. I talk to founders all the time that are like for the same survey. It's like, how do I find the time? You find the time when you're feeling something, when you're excited, when you're pissed off, when you're annoyed. A good piece of content is a love letter to your ideal buyer. So like a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to put myself out there because what if like, some dude like doesn't, then he was never gonna buy to begin with. It's really a boundary. This is what it takes to work with me. As a white woman, I have the privilege to say whatever and kind of do whatever, and people give me a round of applause. So post the things that you feel like you have the privilege to, knowing the biases and the systems at play, essentially. And you don't need, a new piece of content every day or every week. I'm not a marketing expert by any means, but I do think that you have like 5 pillars of content, right? Like, an example, a feeling, again, I don't really know the mechanics of, marketing, but you don't need a bunch of pieces of content. One of the things that Tanya tied to my brand has really taught me, she doesn't buy SaaS solutions. She's just a prompt expert. She has like a 90-page prompt for everything, is I can write one piece of content and then she puts it into her little prompt thing, similar to a sales message with the tone and the content. And it's like, oh, here's like 40 different ways that you can spin off of this. I think, again, more like neurotypical people or neurodivergent people aren't really good at a hook because we focus so much on the science of things. So it's like I'll have the science of something and she's like, oh, you should use this hook and this hook and this hook. And then now you have like one piece of content that could be branched out to like 40 or 50 different pieces of content. So for me, I write the content based on this emotional reaction. It's not, sometimes I write 10 pieces of content a week. Sometimes I write 10 pieces of content, a quarter, depending on how emotionally charged I am and how boring my role is. So a lot of people will prevent themselves from getting started because it feels like this huge call to action and this like constant machine that you need to be feeding. And then the ego is like, well, what if they think this? What if they think that? And then especially with the optics of the algorithm, right? Like I'm in a few like LinkedIn communities where people are constantly like looking at their numbers, and I'm like, stop fucking looking at your numbers. If this is a piece of content that's really reflective of how you are, how you think, and the boundaries that you have in place, link that over. I link the same piece of content that I wrote 4 years ago that has 6 likes on it and me and my team are five of them. But it's so reflective to my value prop that I DM that. I link it into different Slack communities I am. There's a lot of trust that, of like opening up a LinkedIn piece of content because everyone, regardless of your age, is on LinkedIn. So essentially, you write the content once. If this content is reflective to the type of person that you want to be paying you, you save that in your toolkit, and you don't have the optics of, oh, did someone see it or did someone like it? People who can afford you don't like your content. That's your friends. Save that, send that to your mom if you want a high five. So don't overthink when you do content. Don't overthink the abundance mentality of there always needs to be a lot. And definitely don't let the vanity metrics of how many views or how many likes, because if you're good, you will relink that and rework that over and over and over because it is a reflection of what you actually want.
Destiny, this is absolutely wonderful. We're at time here, but I think I hope the audience had the chance to learn as much as I did, and this was absolutely like a master class on getting a sales job, but also any job. And like I feel like just to reiterate, I completely agree with you. I think people should just post on LinkedIn, and it's a reflection of who you are, and in ways that maybe a resume can't really translate. And yeah, I hope folks, if you want to give Say Wise a try, we also, as part of this like AMA series, we're launching, like giving a promo code Destiny 10, Destiny's name, number 10. Feel free to use that. It'll give you a lifetime 10% discount. And we hope to achieve that, just help people create content that's reflective of who they are, that's authentic to themselves. And yeah, Bethany, thank you so much. How can people be in touch with you if they want to, keep in touch, I guess?
Cold call me 10 times in a row, send me a rogue ass calendar invite, comment on my post, hey Destiny, you dumb bitch, I'm trying to get in touch with you. I love someone scrappy, especially if you're looking for your first SDR role. I will make a whole hub of all the outbound you did to me and then use that to sell you to my fanders. So there's no rules getting noticed with me. And then obviously I have a lot of resources on my website. You can follow it's Destiny, or my business LinkedIn page for all of my open jobs as well.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll be back next week. We'll cover like different industries as well. So yeah, Destiny, thank you so much for your time and thanks for joining us today.
Bye.